Because I think my thought process has always been, if everything failed, I've done Fashion Week.
Yeah.
Like I've done it. Like I can tick that off the box.
Yeah.
It's like a dream come true.
Yeah, like a bucket list.
Yeah, literally. It's like a bucket list thing. And yeah, I think my thought process is always, well, if this fails, then at least I've had a good time. I've like done some bucket list things. I can tick it off. I can be like, yeah, I did Fashion Week now.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Designing Tomorrow podcast, your guide to sustainable entrepreneurship. I'm Anne, and today I'm very glad to welcome back my co-host Kanishka.
Hi guys, this is Kanishka back again. Namaste. And I hope you all missed me because this is our third episode and I'm so excited because I have with me Chamiah from Dewey Clothing, and I've been wanting to meet her ever since forever because graduate futures keep mentioning her. Chamiah, welcome. Do you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So thank you so much for having me. It's my first time doing an LCF podcast. So I'm actually really excited. I'm Chamiah. I'm the founder of Dewey Clothing, which apparently Graduate Futures loves, which I love as well because I worked lots with them when I was at uni. And a little bit of background as to how I'm kind of related to LCF is I studied here for 4 years. And I studied fashion design development and I graduated in 2022. So it's not been that long.
Yeah, we also know that you went to London Fashion Week at the same year you graduate, right? So do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, so I literally graduated in, June, July kind of time. And then I did London Fashion Week for the first time in September. So like that summer was insane.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was hardcore. I basically won a couple of awards straight after I graduated. I won the D-Base Award and a Pour Moi Uplifting Woman Award.
Yeah.
And that gave me the funding to like just make a last minute decision, be like, I'm just going to do Fashion Week. Because I think my thought process has always been, if everything failed, I've done Fashion Week. Like I've done it. Like I can tick that off the box. It's like a dream come true.
Yeah, like a bucket list.
Yeah, literally. It's like a bucket list thing. And yeah, I think my thought process is always, well, if this fails, then at least I've had a good time. I've done some bucket list things. I can tick it off. I can be like, yeah, I did Fashion Week now.
Have a good story.
Yeah, exactly. And like I say, I won a couple of awards, which of course was really exciting. And it meant that I could just take the risk and just be like, do you know what? I'm going to put the money into this. And I kid you not, I literally was sewing non-stop for a month of just like,
oh my God,
trying to get 10 looks together, which when you say 10 looks doesn't sound like a lot, but if anyone's on like a pattern cutting or like fashion course, oh my God, 10 looks in a month is a lot.
Yeah.
Like it is a lot because I also had to like design the whole collection really quickly and source all the fabrics and test things, and none of the stuff was fitted until the morning of either. So literally I met the models on the day and fitted it there and then. So like the pressure was insane, but it was the best day of my life. So it was worth it.
Yeah.
Amazing. I wanted to ask if you could like let the audience know a bit more about your brand because it's adaptive clothing. Would you like to tell more about your brand?
Yeah, of course. So Dewey Clothing is revolutionising fashion for people under 5 foot. And so that's anyone under 5 foot. That's people who are 3'2", or that's someone who's 4'11". That's anyone in that bracket. And believe it or not, it's about 1 in 10 of us in the UK. So there's lots of us.
Yeah.
Worldwide, it's about 30% of people under 5 foot. You imagine there's certain places in the world that are quite small. So there's certain places, especially over in Asia, I think, especially, people are quite small. And yeah, places like here or in the US or certain places in Europe, it's about 1 in 10 people. And again, really long story short, the way that came about was just before I went to uni. So it was 2018. I met a young person who was short stature. So she was probably about 3'11", let's say. She was very small. And I spent a lot of time with her. I was on this government-funded program called NCS. For anyone that doesn't know, that's National Citizen Service. You basically do like, it's a bit like Camp America, but maybe less exciting. We do like charity work and volunteering, and we do these like big bike rides, loads of fun stuff. And anyway, so I got to spend a month with this young person, and I learned loads about her disability and how it affected her, but also as someone who loves fashion, who like really cares about fashion and who's always wanted to be a fashion designer, just become really curious and just thought like, where does she get her clothes from? Googled it and found that there wasn't really anything, and thought, well, I love fashion, I love making people feel great, so why don't I marry the two? And I was talking about it this morning in one of my meetings. When I was younger, my thing was always, I want to be a fashion designer and I want to make women feel great. Like I want to make women feel like empowered in their bodies, and I don't think we can ever like shame women for what they wear. And I think I love like the women's body and how we kind of accentuate that. And my favorite designer's Dior, and how he like cinches in the waist. I love it so much. My favorite thing. So then when I met this young person and found there was this gap in the market, it like put a new meaning to like making people feel great, because it was like, wow, they really don't have anywhere. And I love to give that to people. So that's kind of a long story short of how it kind of developed. And then after Fashion Week in this September 22, just after I graduated, I went viral on TikTok for the clips from Fashion Week, and it was crazy. It was seen by over 100 million people worldwide, and just had thousands of comments from people like, I'm 4'10" and I also really struggle, or I don't know, I'm 4'4" and I don't have any condition, but I'm just small and I also can't find clothes. And it just opened my eyes to just how huge the issue was. And I think people probably assume that petite targets that, but it really doesn't. And even people who are on that cusp, they're like 4'11", 5 foot, really are struggling. So yeah, that's kind of like what we do, where we're at the moment. We're, like I say, we're revolutionising fashion for anyone under 5 foot.
That's interesting that you found your niche, and especially on social media, you got the first validation that there is a gap in the market. Yeah, that's 100%. Interesting to know.
100%.
And I think the adaptive like fashion market is like quite unfamiliar to a lot of people who are doing fashion and clothing. So are there like any specific facts that you want to like let more people know about, or call for like more attention?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of really interesting ones. So there was one that I was talking about this morning with my team, and there's a statistic, and I can't remember the exact number, I think it's 84%, but we'll go with the other one, which is for the people that are over the age of 16, the number of people that acquire disability is 78%. And I'm sure that the statistic is, someone will probably comment if this is wrong, it's 84% of people acquire their disability in life. So it's only that 16% are born with it. So there are lots and lots of us that acquire disabilities. And there are people that acquire disabilities that make them small as well. So it can be things like malnutrition. It can be an illness when you're young that maybe you just don't grow as tall. So part of our work as a brand is to educate people a little bit of why people are small and to destigmatize that, because there's definitely a growing knowledge that there's this thing called heightism, and we're really trying to address that and say, look, these people might be shorter, but they are still capable as everyone else. They still want to be fashionable. They want to fit in. Just because they stand out for being a bit shorter doesn't mean they don't deserve clothing and that we can't provide it. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things. But I think as well, to put it into perspective a little bit for people, we all know Stephen Hawking, and he's probably one of the most famous disabled people ever. And he actually didn't become disabled till he was 21. So he lived his whole 21 years of life, able-bodied. He went to university. He was obviously really smart. And it was only when he was 21 that he acquired this motor neuron disease. And then it was again that kind of deteriorated, but it was again he had another condition a bit later on in life, which made him lose his speech. And he woke up from this illness, just not being able to speak. So I kind of tell people that story to say, look, I'm 25. I'm sure lots of people that listen to this will be like 18, 19, 20. At your ages, like Stephen Hawking was literally the same as most people listening to this. So it puts that into perspective, how disability can happen to anyone at any point, whether it's through an accident or like Stephen Hawking, you have some kind of condition that is, I guess, benign until a certain point in your life. But I think it's important that we all recognise disability exists and work to destigmatise it, because of that reason it could happen at any time.
Like you rightly put that about your example, we see from your website that you're working about expanding inclusivity and also like targeting people with wheelchair. Is that the plan moving forward?
Yeah, so the plan moving forward really is to include everyone under 5 foot. And within that bracket, there's definitely people who have disabilities, like they have things like brittle bone disease where they might use wheelchairs. They've got things like spinal muscular atrophy. They have things like Down syndrome or dwarfism. There's lots of conditions in that kind of short stature market. But equally, there's billions of people in that market that don't have disability. So we're aiming to be as inclusive as possible. And I think through our kind of future campaigns especially, I'm really passionate about representing the kind of percentages. So for example, it's thought that about 15% of the global population are disabled.
Okay.
So in my eyes, that means at least 15% of our campaigns have to show someone with a disability.
Right.
Equally, that will go into things like race, and we kind of have those percentages equal. It shouldn't be all one ethnicity and then 5% as like a tick box thing. It should be that we actually reflect what the population looks like.
Absolutely.
And again, when we come to things like wheelchair users, it's about 8% of the UK are wheelchair users. So that means 8% of our campaigns should feature them. And hopefully that can influence other brands to show that it doesn't need to be a tick box, but I do think you need to be conscious of it. As much as we're not ticking boxes like there's this percent and this percent, we can aim towards actually representing what people actually do look like, because we don't see it enough.
Absolutely. And like you rightly said, disability, you don't necessarily need to be born with it. You can develop it later in life. And it's just good to have your brands offering you that option to choose from, just in case.
Yeah, because again, like if we take someone like Stephen Hawking, I imagine that through his 21 years of life, he would have worn clothing from wherever. Like it just would have been similar to what we do now, kind of like a high street thing. I imagine that when he became disabled and he had a motor neuron disease, so his dexterity was lost and the use of his muscles and things, I imagine that was really tough with clothing. And I know that's the story for lots of people, especially if they've got degenerative diseases and conditions. But equally, any of us could have an accident tomorrow and then our whole identity of how we dress changes. And I hear it all the time where people say, for, I don't know, 40 years of my life, I loved fashion and I wore certain things, and then overnight I was disabled and then had to learn from scratch, and then had to just wear like trackies or pajamas. And it doesn't need to be like that, because adaptive fashion doesn't need to be that difficult. So yeah, I'm passionate about people understanding that.
Absolutely. Education is more important these days about adaptive clothing.
100%.
Yeah, we know that you have like a very different size chart, right, among the like all the brands. So like, do you have any like specific consideration behind like starting from a size chart instead of like other aspects?
I think the size chart for us was really important because of course our customer's small and we're starting a brand essentially that no one's ever done before. So the size chart's like key. And the way I kind of developed that was getting lots of data from people and asking people to send me in their measurements so I could really understand it. But I think it was also a really interesting place to start from because we own that. So aside from anything else, our biggest selling point is the fit. It's how things fit, it's the sizes. And I think if people are looking into things like adaptive fashion, especially if you're looking at things like things for people who it might be wheelchair users, for example, you probably will have a different size chart because their bodies are different, because they're sat a lot of the time. And especially people who have become paralyzed, for example, their bodies change completely. So understanding that's really important. It's not as simple as just copying a size chart from someone online. You really do need to take the time to understand the bodies of the people you're catering to. And as scary a challenge that might seem, is so rewarding when you actually do get there and you actually make the difference in people's lives and things actually fit the way they're meant to. Because at the end of the day, we're not really meant to fit into clothes, they're meant to fit us. So we need to think about that 100%.
So like what kind of like feedbacks have you gotten like from your customers for this new like size?
So we haven't put out our kind of initial collection with the new size chart just yet. But I can say that the feedback has always been positive. And I think it's especially important to talk about because I'm average height, I'm non-disabled. So I'm actually not my customer at all. Like I couldn't be further from it, to be honest with you. Although I'm relatively small, I'm like 5'2", I'm in that petite range. I don't understand my customers' lived experience and I never can, and I will never try to. But what I hope that my customers can sense is that I really try to understand it. And I actually think for people that listen to this and worry about going into a field they don't they're not part of. So, for example, we talk about adaptive fashion. I actually think it's a bit of an unfair advantage almost, as they kind of call it in the business world, that I don't deal with my customers' issues. So I'm really emotionally detached from it in that sense, that I'm not dealing with it on the daily basis that they are. So I have the energy to come at this from a different perspective, and I'm able to see all of the issues and then put the solution together from a really like non-emotional point of view, but very logical, like, okay, I see you're struggling with this and you're struggling with that, and this would make your life easier and you would appreciate this, and curating it. Whereas I think when you are your own customer, you can get so lost in the emotional aspect of it and what you want to get out of it. And I have had to remove myself. So I think feedback wise, people have always appreciated that. And I think growing a bit of a community means that I've made loads of friends. So I'm able to just ask them the really open, honest questions. Like, I'm designing this dress, let's say, and how would you put it on? Can you put it over your head, or would you step into it? Or if I put a side zip in it, would that be okay? And people are usually really open to just giving the feedback and being like, no, that doesn't work. Or actually, yeah, we're fine with a little side zip. Don't worry too much. And that's really important. That's massively important for me. Yeah, 100%. So and for me to be able to just ask them rather than guessing or assuming. Having friends in the community that I've built through building my business, I'm able to just go to them and be like, is this right? Or if I get things wrong, I can just be like, okay, can you just let me know why I've got it wrong? And then learning from it, which again, I think is important for people to realise, because people get really nervous when it comes to this.
Me too. Like, even like imagine myself like trying to make a clothes for them, I would always like have this nervous like sentiment in my heart that, am I like offending you, like in some cases? So like I just think it's so important to have like free conversation with them.
100%. And I think as well, to give people peace of mind, I've met so many disabled people over my time now, and I've worked with people that don't look like me, who aren't me, who could see me in a very, well, who do see me in a very privileged position. But people will always say to you, I'd rather you just asked. So if you're worried, just ask. And I think when we're talking about disabled people especially, they're so resilient. Like, they've heard much worse, they've seen much worse, they've been treated much worse. So you actually making an effort to try is what's important. If you get it wrong, they understand. I think it's one of those things. Most people don't try, so when you do try, they respect it. It's like, you might not have got it right. I'll tell you what, I don't know, you did wrong, or whatever it is. I think the worst thing to do is to worry and then not do it. Like, the best thing is just to try.
And I think the story for every disabled people is also different. Someone may have screws in the body. Someone may feel no pain in the body because of the disability. So this is sort of a personal question coming from someone who is also working on inclusivity and sports clothing for including Paralympians and like para-athletes. My question is, initially, you mentioned you're not the customer of your brand. How did you go about, like, you went viral on TikTok. How did you take those research and findings, and how do you navigate going through with your research? Because certain disabilities requires more intensive research. Do you speak to doctors as well? Do you speak to just your clients, or do you just speak to a particular person with a particular disability? How do you go about it?
So when I started, I had quite a niche. So I was focusing on dwarfism, and I was focusing on the most common form, which is called achondroplasia. And for reference, it affects about 650,000 people worldwide. So so when you look at it in the total of the population, it is a minute, like, it's a tiny community. But you can also think 650,000 people, that's a lot of people that need clothes, don't have any. So I think that really benefited me, because I focused on one thing. I could have, and what I did think about right in the beginning was, I want to do all disabilities and I want to be inclusive of everyone. But realistically, I found quite quickly that that was going to be too big a challenge, and that I needed to pinpoint a focus. And then the way that I started my research was through Instagram. I just messaged people. I quite literally just messaged them and was like, hey, I'm starting this brand. Would love to have a chat with you about what you struggle with, to really understand actually what they wanted and needed. Because it's quite easy for me to be like, oh, I assume that everything's just too long, I'll just make things shorter. But actually that might not always be the issue. And I did learn really quickly that there were a lot of other factors. It was things like dexterity issues, even just the practice of where lots of our customers have shorter limbs, like putting something over your head, for example, is not as easy, which I wouldn't have known had I not have asked. So it really was speaking to the customer more than anything else. I have done my dabbling in like medical journals, more because I've had to. They're very boring to read, but sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find when you're dealing with anything to do with disability, it's going to be quite medical a lot of the time. But another thing that has been really beneficial is going to conventions. So most disabled communities will have conventions, whether it's people that have limb differences. There's charities for that and organisations for that. There's organisations for things like brittle bone or SMA or Down syndrome, whatever it might be. And a lot of the time you can go along to these things. And I've been to a few of them now, especially for dwarfism, and they've got medical professionals there. And I can just ask questions. I can just be like, what is it that they really struggle with? And when you do these operations, how does that affect how they use their body afterwards? And how can I create clothing that takes that in account? And one thing that the medical people will always say is that they're so glad someone's doing it, because they know from a medical point of view how difficult it is, and the fact that no one in the fashion industry is really listening, so that when someone does, people will really like nurture you, and they will really just have those open, honest conversations with you. So it is just a case of like really putting yourself out there, and it is quite uncomfortable. I think especially when I started, I was like, am I going to offend people? Like, I don't know what the right terminology is. I don't know if I'm asking the wrong questions, or I'm asking too invasive questions. But like I say, people just appreciate that you're doing it, to be honest. And I think another question people always ask me is like what do the customers think? Like, do they think it's weird that you're not like them? And I think for some people, their initial thought is a bit of skepticism. Like, why is this girl doing this? Like, what's she getting out of it? She can't even wear the clothes herself. But quite soon after, when they realise your heart's actually in it for the right reasons, like I say, they just welcome you in, and they want to help you, and they want to give you that feedback. And I think the community as a whole, the disabled community, is so resilient that nothing you say or do would ever be wrong. So it really is a case of when you need to do that research, you just get out there and you find anything you can, and you speak to as many people as you can. Because like you said before, they all have different experiences. Like even two people with the same condition will have a completely different experience. And that's equally different if you're born with your condition versus acquiring a condition a bit later on.
Yeah, I think that is just like entrepreneurial, like from a designer to be entrepreneur. And also you have a team, right? Like, so I'm just wondering, like, how did you manage to find people that share the same morals and like values with you?
Yeah, so this was like a weird one for me. So throughout my journey of building Dewey, it's been about 3.5 years now, and it's only the past 6 months really that I've had a team. And for the first like 3 years, obviously doing everything myself, people did always recommend like, look, find like a co-founder or something. But I always thought, well, no one's going to love this as much as I do. No one is going to understand it the way I do now. I've been doing it for too long. But long story short, I had a mentor, a business mentor, and I got that mentor through winning an award, winning D-Base. And he had his own fashion brand. And we worked together for a year as a mentor. And then the kind of end of the contract, let's say, was kind of coming up where he didn't need to mentor me anymore. But actually, I think at that point, it was more like, okay, well, I want to go for investment and I want to actually get this off the ground and really build it. And then he was kind of like, oh, okay, like that's interesting. I might know some people that might be able to help. And then it kind of just developed. So now my old business mentor is now like a co-founder.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it was like I think quite a like ungeneric way that it worked. And then again, through some of his contacts, we've kind of brought people in. But it's strange the way things work. So when LCF opened this new building, they had a launch event night thing.
Yeah.
And one of my pieces was featured on the night, because obviously I'm a graduate and I've done something semi-successful.
Yeah, you're clearly the face.
And yeah, one of my partners is like the networking king, and he literally will just go and talk to anyone. Like, it's actually insane.
We need someone.
I
like
know,
this
literally.
in the
Yeah,
team.
I know, literally. And he just introduced himself to people. And two of the people he introduced us to on the evening now, again, work as part of our kind of buying and merchandising sector. So it's been a very ungeneric way that it's worked. But it means that I have a team now of people that are much older than I am. They're much more seasoned than I am. They've all worked for all the big businesses, and they've, I don't know, built and sold businesses, and I'm just like a 25-year-old, like,
But you're the
coasting along a little
soul.
bit.
You're the soul of the brand.
Yeah, but the good thing is as well that everyone that is in the brand now, there's about 7 of us, we've all got the same vision. We all really care about ethics. We really care about sustainability. We care about our customers, and that's really important. If people are going to build teams, you need to agree on those fundamentals, because otherwise people hit bumps in the road with anything. You're going to clash on, I don't know, certain opinions, but as long as you've got that fundamental, that's kind of a good base. But yeah, it was a funny way it worked. It was a mentor turned into a co-founder, and then we've just kind of picked people up along the way. But yeah, it's been lovely, and it's so nice not to do it on my own anymore, basically.
Okay, I want to jump into my favorite part, pitching and funding. So can you let us very quickly know what kind of awards have you won? Where have you pitched? What worked? What didn't work for you?
Everything.
So I've done a few. I think I started, it must have been my first one, was the Enterprise Challenge.
Okay.
And that was 2021. Yeah, 2021. And I worked with Graduate Futures quite a lot on that, because that was my first one. I was actually really nervous. I was like, don't know how far I'm going to get in this. As much as I believe in Dewey and what we're doing, you actually never know when it's your first one. Long story short, won it. And then because I won it, I got automatically entered into the Creative Enterprise Awards or something. They've got a slightly different name, but it's through UAL, not just LCF. And then won that one. I know, which was crazy because it was like a day after the other as well. This was in lockdown as well, by the way, so it was all at home. So it was really weird because I won it, but I was at home on my own. So then like
Celebrate by
I know,
yourself.
literally, I was like, now I need to like get ready for work tomorrow and like make my sandwiches and like have a shower. It was really weird, but obviously really exciting. And I think that validation of winning that helped me with my confidence for other pitches. So it's one of those things you kind of just have to do it to build your confidence. And I used to have like post-it notes like all around my webcam, so like people couldn't see it. They could probably see me looking off over there reading my thing, but that really helped. And then I went on to win what was the next one? Like I said, I did D-Base, which was the year after. So that was the year I graduated, and it was like a really quick succession. I think I must have done the D-Base pitch maybe a week before I graduated or a week after. It was really close. The same with the Pour Moi one. That was like the same week or the same couple of weeks.
Okay.
And so I won D-Base, won £15,000 for my business, and I won this Pour Moi Uplifting Women Award, and that was £5,000. And then I also, that same week time, got into the UEL Accelerator, which was a kind of, you get £6,000 to kind of be part of the course. So I went from like having no money and being like, oh my God, how am I going to make this work when I graduate, to, okay, I've got some money. And that's like when I said, I was like, okay, I'm going to do Fashion Week, because if all of this fails, I've ticked that off the box and I've done it. But the confidence thing really comes from just actually doing it and practicing. And once you've won one of them, or you've won a couple, or you don't win and you learn what didn't work, then it builds your confidence. But I think the thing that I've always had in my favour is that I really, really, really believe in what I do, and that in my mind, there's no way it's going to fail. Like, it just won't. Like, there'll be someone that will believe in it, someone that will put cash in it. I also always think there's so much money in the world, and there's got to be a way that I can find it, basically. There's got to be a way.
Manifesting it.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm manifesting it. There's got to be a way. There's so many rich people out there that are like billionaires, millionaires, and one of them's got to believe in me. Do you know what I mean? So we make it work, and I think I've had that in my favour because I really, really believe in it.
Yeah.
So then I'm not as nervous on the day because I'm like, right, I can answer all your questions because I know them, because I've done the research, and I can I can validate my proposal because of how much I believe in it. And I think that shines through a lot of the time. Someone framed it to me before and they were like, look, if you go to an investor and you're like, oh, I've got this idea, but I'm not sure it's going to work, or I think it might work, but I'm not sure, it could fail. They're obviously not going to believe in you. You've got to like almost emphasize how much you believe in it and be a little bit overconfident sometimes without obviously being arrogant and going too far. But I think that's probably where some of my success with awards and competitions has come from. It's just my actual belief in it, that in my mind there's no way it will fail. Like, it will work, and I will find the person who believes in it enough to just fund this next thing. So yeah, I think that's probably been the biggest thing I've learned through pitching.
Do you have any tips for someone who is pitching and looking out for funding?
I think one thing is just apply for everything you find. That's what I did. Like, as much as it might seem like I've won loads of awards, there were actually so many that I didn't win. There's been a lot of Innovate UK ones, especially, that I haven't won. I think I've applied for 4 or 5 of them, haven't won a single one. Didn't win the Mayor's Award 2 years in a row, haven't won lots of others. I think I've probably applied for, let's say, 50, and I've won, 5 or 6 of them. So that's one thing, is like, just apply for them all. If you've got the time, do it. A lot of the time you can copy and paste your answers. Just do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the ones I have won have been like on a whim. So this Pour Moi one, randomly found it. I don't even know how I found it. It was so random. The application took maybe 5 minutes. But from that, I won $5,000 and it funded me for a few months to keep going. So you never know where it's going to come from. Like, just apply. And then I think in terms of like the whole pitching thing is the confidence thing I'd come back to again. And if you're not confident in what you do, why would they be? Like, you have to really show them why you believe in it, why it's going to work. Make sure you've done the research, obviously. That's kind of a given. But also, if you don't know the answer, just say it. Like, if someone asks you, I don't know, a finance question, like, what does your turnover look like in 3 years? And you don't know, just be like, honestly, I don't know that just yet, but I'm happy to go away and come back to you in a week's time or something. But I think the confidence is huge. I think that's one of the biggest things, is just have the confidence on the date, fake it till you make it, 100%. I'm still faking it till I make it. Like, it's just one of those things. You just have to pretend because they don't know. Unless you like crack, they don't know that you're not 100%. So you just you've got to bite the bullet. And I also think when you look at really successful people and you read their stories, they had to at some point just do it. Like, just actually push themselves out their comfort zone, and it paid off. Like, there's a saying, isn't there, that you don't grow in your comfort zone, I think's the quote. And it's very true. You do have to just push yourself. Again, worst case, you don't win. And I don't know, you get bad feedback, and then you go away and you learn. So think of that worst case scenario. It's not that bad. There's worse things in the world. Just give it a go.
Can I quickly also ask that, how do you use the funding? Do you have a CA, or do you do all the mental math?
So when I started, I was really good with like keeping cash flows and P&Ls and all that fun stuff. And I would have a bit of an idea of where the money would go. And then I think once I kind of won lots of this money, it was more like, right, I'm just going to test things. I'm just going to spend all this money on research and development. So that's what I did, basically. And I think that was quite beneficial because I got to learn lots of different stuff. I didn't put all of it in one place and risk it all. I kind of spread it out different places. But for complete transparency, when I graduated and I won those awards, in quite quick succession, I'd won about £20,000-ish, let's say. No, it was 27. It was £27. No, £27. £27,000 I'd won in quite quick succession. Obviously, it's not all in the bank straight away because they give it to you in bits. But lots of that was funding me to do it. And it's not glamorous. I wasn't taking like $3,000 a month to like live my best life. I was taking like £500 a month. And until now, that's still the way it's been for a long time. So I think another thing to get your head around is that it's a bit of a long haul. And you just have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. But yeah, some of the money goes towards funding me. And then the other side of it will be for like things like sampling and just testing things. I think when you're new, just test everything. Because then at least you know what doesn't work. So when you do get a bigger amount of funding, you know where to put it instead of really risking it.
Can you just briefly share with us like your future plans? Because we know you have a launch like in 14th of March. So can you just like share with us like some of the recent plans for Dewey and for yourself?
Yeah, so we're working on a new collection at the moment. We're speaking to investors and we're trying to raise the capital to like really, really push it. And I've always said I've got the vision and I know what it needs to look like and I know what needs to be done, but I've not always had the resource. So we're getting the resource, hopefully in the next couple of months. And then, yeah, we're pushing a new collection out there and trying to kind of get into these bigger retail spaces as well. What I've focused on before has been around short stature. So that's people that are around 4 foot. Our new collection will cater to people who are anything from about 4 foot to 5 foot. So it's going to be a much more height inclusive collection, a much bigger collection. Before we've launched with like 4 pieces per collection, this is going to be more like 20, 30 pieces. It's much bigger. It's got a whole team behind it. So it's much more polished, I guess. We've learned loads now. I've learned so much that I can put all of the learnings into it. So the bigger picture of all of this and the really long-term goal is to be the place that people recognise if you're under 5 foot. So in the UK, if you're tall, you might know Long Tall Sally. I want to be the place that if you're small, you're like, oh, you just go to Dewey. Or if you have a friend who's like, oh, I don't know, 4'11", I find clothes really hard. You'd be like, oh, you go to Dewey. I want to be that kind of global recognised name, so that people know where to go and that they're not like going to seamstress and going to tailors all the time to get their clothes fixed. So that's the big overarching plan.
How can we find you on social medias?
So everywhere we're Dewey_clothing, and our website is deweyclothing.com. So you can go and have a look. If you go on the website right now, there's not much to sell, but you can sign up for a newsletter and then you'll have kind of early access, all the sneak peeks to behind the scenes stuff. The people that are on our newsletter, they're the ones that find out everything first, and they're the ones that know like the nitty gritty of what goes on behind the scenes. So yeah, sign up to that newsletter. Otherwise, we post on social media all the time, so you can really find out the kind of heart of the brand that way.
Thank you so much, Chamiah, for coming in, giving us your time. And thank you, everyone, for listening to us. We have another amazing episode coming up next week, which is going to be also on adaptive clothing. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to watch the podcast, if you want to listen to it. We have it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave in the comments your suggestions, any feedback that you have. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Perfect. Bye, guys. Yeah.